So live from North Woods and Waters, January 21st, 2025. As I said, I'm Marty Harding on the board of directors. And our program, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about who we are. So North Woods and Waters of the St. Croix Heritage Area promotes the outstanding natural, cultural, historic, and recreational resources of the St. Croix River watershed and the nationally significant stories of its people. And I love the last part of that mission statement, particularly as it applies to Laurie's presentation today, because she is a story collector par excellence. She is collecting stories all across the East Central region of Minnesota through a grant that we've received, and you'll be hearing all about that. So we are, the watershed itself is really big. It's almost 8,000 square miles. It covers 2 states, parts of 2 states, 4 sovereign nations call this area home. There are 18 counties. If you care, there's 32 sub-watersheds and 114 zip codes, and more communities than that, because many communities share a zip code. We have about 12,000 years of human history. When the glaciers receded, people came here for the same reasons that all of us come here, for the resources, for the beauty, to find a place to call home. We have 3 major goals. We want to create sustainable economic opportunities. We know that national heritage areas, which is what we're seeking, bring economic opportunities, especially to the smaller towns that have stories to tell, but really no platform to do it. We connect the region in order to help preserve and enhance the resources that we have here within our nationally distinctive watershed. And our 3rd goal is to increase awareness and understanding of our heritage stories and the resources, both for people who live here, our residents, and for our visitors and a global audience. There isn't a day that goes by with this organization that I don't learn something new about the place where I live, and it's so enriching. In the United States, we have 61 national heritage areas. Each of them tells a significant part of our nation's story. It's said if you've been to one national heritage area, you've been to one, because they're all so different. Our story, we have many stories. The story that our designation says is most significant is our conservation story and what we have done to really preserve so many lands here, lands and waters. So we want to put national on our name. We want to become a national heritage area. As you can see, there aren't any in Minnesota or Wisconsin. And we've been at this for 15 years now. And we think it's about time for us to become the national heritage area that this area deserves. Tonight, we're going to be able to sit back and listen to Laurie Allmann as she talks about our artist in residence. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Laurie. Laurie is an essayist and a poet whose writing is inspired by the national world. Her work has found expression in public radio commentary for NPR and KFAI, in song lyrics, video documentary plays, and monologues designed for live performance. She's a writer. She's received a Minnesota Book Award for her creative nonfiction book, Far From Tame, Reflections from the Heart of a Continent, and her recent book of poetry, An Hour From Now. Hour From Now was awarded a gold medal from the Midwest Independent Publishers Association. She has been a course instructor for the Loft Literary Center and is a founding co-editor of Agate Online magazine. And maybe at some point you can tell us about Agate. It is a lovely online magazine that really does in-depth articles about things that we're all interested in. So tonight, Laurie will tell you what she's our first artist in residence. She designed the program and is helping us build a program that can be sustained into the future. She'll read some selections of new poetry and share perspectives from the amazing people she's met through Local Voices interviews. one-on-one mentorships with youth, and community-based writing workshops. And you'll also learn about ways that you can participate in the things that Laurie is doing, whether you're a novice or an experienced writer. And I need to do a shout out to the East Central Regional Arts Council. They provided funding so that we have been able to have Laurie with us for this year. Laurie also, her book, An Hour From Now, is part of an initiative we've done to collect writings about the St. Croix watershed. And you can find the other writings on St. Croix Select on our webpage. But we've selected books that fall into the human history category, the natural history category, and culture. And I think you'd have fun just perusing the titles that have been chosen. It's an ongoing project. We will be adding more titles as we go along. I'm going to turn it over now to Laurie. And I'm going to sit back and listen to Laurie as she tells us about her residency and reads to us this evening. Welcome, Laurie.
Marty, thank you very much. I'm honored to be part of this organization, and I think I was most attracted to the idea that they are working to celebrate the nationally significant stories of its people. So although I'm a writer and am spending part of my time in the field and doing some original work, I'm very excited about helping to engage with people in local communities who live in the watersheds to tap into their own stories about this place. And one of the things I love about NWW is oh man, ever since I got out of college, I was based on the St. Croix River, so I'm focused on the river itself, but I love how NWW also includes the watershed and the features of the watershed. So that means not only the tributaries to the river, but all the many landscapes and the communities that are within that watershed. So part of what's happened, and as I've been traveling around these places, is I'm sometimes finding out that there was one park manager that didn't even know that their park was in the watershed of the St. Croix. So, and I can understand the rivers flow in different directions, and sometimes places are actually closer to the Mississippi, right? And yet the water ends up in the St. Croix. So I'm learning. I think other people are learning about the hope for a heritage area, but also getting engaged in the lands around them that they call home. So as Marty said, this is a brand new program for North Woods and Waters of the St. Croix, and it's a pilot program. So one of my tasks is to try to help create a template for people like me who come later, artists of different sorts. I happen to be a writer, but we'll see who comes next that can engage with these stories and these people in this landscape. For my part, I have a number of projects. One of them, I think Marty mentioned, is called the Local Voices Project. So I'm going around and talking to individuals in actually the counties that are supported by the grant, which is just a part of the watershed. But so Chisago, Pine, Kennebec, Mille Lacs, or Kennebec, I should pronounce that correctly, and Isanti. So I'm interviewing people, doing audio interviews, like hour-long interviews, which is thrilling. So, I've talked to a writer naturalist, I've talked to a potter, I've talked to a woman who's an organic farmer and grows wild ginger to make ginger ale, and have done lots of land conservation projects. I talked to an historian who's interested in educating people about history as it happened before and future history, right? The history we're making. So these stories will be edited and produced for online content that you can watch for later. The residency started last May, wraps up in June. So some of these things you will see come to fruition next summer. So I encourage you to keep checking back on this artist in residency program on Northwoods and Waters website just to see what comes of it. So those interviews, that's one project, which, by the way, I invite your ideas for people, interesting people who live within those counties that I mentioned, who might have great stories to tell. I want to have a diverse group of people with lots of perspectives. So different cultures, different ages. I welcome your ideas for people you really think I ought to talk to. They don't have to be people who are well known or even in a leadership role. I'd love to talk to all different kinds of folks who live here. So another project that I'm involved with that I love is a one-on-one mentorship program with young writers. And I haven't talked to a lot of people with that program, but I love the people I've connected with. They range from there was a 10-year-old named Claire who's writing a novel and was filling me in on the plans for it, the outline she has, the concept of it that I cannot share, right? That's a girl to watch. But I've also talked with young writers in their 20s, one of whom just moved to Denver. But I gave her a writing prompt. I told her she had to write a poem with the word elevation in the title because I thought that's the main thing that was changing for her as she's moving from Minnesota to Colorado. And sure enough, she contacted me with a poem and a photo of herself with her writing notes on a notebook on the top of a mountain. So this program is traveling. There's another writer who writes historical fiction. And with these young people, I'm not only hoping to encourage their writing, but also to have them really look at the role that place plays in their writing, right? Place shouldn't just be a backdrop or a setting for a story, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. It can be a central character. We are so rooted in landscapes, and our lives are not defined by landscapes, but they're shaped by the lands and waters that we call home and the history of place. So with a writer like that, she won't be writing about the St. Croix, but my hope is that when she's developing characters and building out her essays or her novels, that it will have a more, I guess, authentic role and be lifted up as something important in and of itself in her writing. So I happen to be a poet and an essayist and an environmental writer. That's kind of what I've come up through, the world I've come up through. But when I am working with other writers in the community, I'm open to all genres and also inviting people who've never tried poetry to give it a go. I think there are folks out there who think of poetry as something a little obscure. Maybe you could use a footnote to explain what the writer meant. But poetry is as varied as any other type of writing. And I would say the type of poetry I work with is more narrative poetry that has a rhythm and a rhyme scheme, but it's embedded in the poem. It isn't like lovely Shel Silverstein or Robert Frost, where there's a clear, rigorous rhyme scheme. So when I'm working with people out in the watershed, I invite them to write freely from the heart with a rhythm that makes sense to them and share it with others, hopefully by reading aloud. So that one-on-one mentorship is another main project of mine where I meet young people at libraries, which is one of the ways that the East Central Library System is part of this residency project. They partnered with us and are very important as hosts for workshops and places for me to meet up with young writers. And it's a great way to connect with the community. And And I gotta say, I love the friends groups that are affiliated with the various library branches. They really rock. They show up quietly and support all kinds of events happening at the libraries. So for me, I have to say, part of my experience of this watershed is seeing all the beautiful community engagement that there is out there with people making their place better, investing in the place. So uh, then I would say the other main project, other than my own writing, would be when I do actual events uh, in community settings, often at the libraries, but not always. Sometimes they're poetry readings, mostly focused on original works that have come out of this residency so far, um, but also writing workshops where I am working with other folks who want to try their hand at writing, or already are writers and want to be around other people who are writing. And, and that has been so inspiring to me, that people would turn out for these events, um, respond to the prompts that they're given. One in particular, one of these writing workshops is called Defining Home, uh, in which I invite people to bring photographs of the places in their community that mean home to them, which isn't just where they happen to live, the house, the structure, of course, it's where they feel at home. So one of my goals in this is to have people hold up those values about this region that they hold dear. And they might be relationships, they might be places, um, they might be the window that looks out of their home onto an oak tree, right? Um, they might be a person, a relationship, a memory with a person they've lost, right? All those things build up this web of belonging in our communities, which in itself is important for people to share those stories. I mean, to write their own stories, but also something magical happens when they share them with others. And I've been um, moved by the willingness of people to come to these workshops on a random Saturday, right? Sometimes the roads are bad, but they'll show up and the lovely friends group will have coffee and cookies for everyone. And it's an instant community and people will open up and be vulnerable about the things that matter to them. And I can't tell you how often they've been brought to tears as they are reading what they've just written, and that the people around them are brought to tears by resonating with what they just heard. It's really beautiful. And I am not gathering those stories to, I wouldn't ask those folks to share those unless they wished. I invite them to, but some of these things are quite personal. And I see the act of participating in the writing and sharing it in that moment to already be worthwhile. Kind of like a sand painting, I guess, right? It doesn't have to be permanent to be significant. So that's just an overview, and we're going to open it up for questions later. If you want to be involved in any of these workshops or one-on-one mentorships, we'll see if there's opportunity for that. That's the beauty of doing this midstream in the writer's residency, because I'll still be out and about doing things through June. So I welcome other questions or any questions about it. But I think I will dive into some of my own recent works. If anyone have a fear of poetry? No? Okay, you're brave. I started writing. I initially wrote essays, nonfiction essays. Do not ever ask me to write dialogue. It would be bad. But at some point, I started moving toward narrative poetry, and the only way that I guess I can explain that is there were certain things that almost felt like they were so big that the only way to properly even approach the subject would be to distill it down. which a poem allows you to do. And the hope is that by telling just a facet of something, that the listener or the reader has an image of the larger, deeper piece. So I have just one book of poetry out that was a privilege to write. And now this project has got me, my portfolio is growing, my little binders adding pages. So I thought I'd share some with you. Thank you for your kind attention. I think I'll start out. I'll start out with one called "On Closer Look," and this was written not actually in the territory of my grant. So I was cheating by sneaking elsewhere in the watershed for this one, but the subject matter was inspired by the areas that I've been roaming around throughout. This one happened to be at Sandrock Cliffs in Grantsburg. And I was struck by how so many things from a distance appeared to be one thing, but as you got closer, you learned that they were something else entirely. And I think that my process in meeting people in communities throughout the watershed has taught me the same thing, that the closer we are to each other, meeting in person, hearing from someone's own mouth how they feel about something, I think helps us to understand more deeply what's really happening. There might be impressions or perspectives that we have from a distance that if we got closer, we would understand better the community that we're part of. So this is called "On Closer Look." Can everyone hear me all right? Yes? Okay, thank you. On closer look, the pine needle floating in mid-air is not floating, but suspended by a strand of spider web. Those stones on the beach, not stones, but sun-bleached shells of mussels. And that wind sound you've been hearing turns out not to be the wind, but instead a set of rapids where the river takes a bend. Everywhere, nothing what at first it seemed. The black bits of debris whirling in funnels over the river valley, those shadows filling the bare branches of dead trees. On closer look, each one a turkey vulture. And now this, how the far shore at some point quietly reveals itself to be the near shore as we approach. They were turkey vultures. It was crazy. I was driving on the Minnesota side of the river, and I looked across. I was near Taylor's Falls, and I looked across the river, and there was what looked like a tornado on the other side of the river. And I didn't realize until I had crossed the bridge and was heading north through St. Croix Falls by the dam, that it was a whole, I don't even know if you call it a kettle when it's turkey vultures, the way you do with broadwings, but I've never seen so many turkey vultures. So things are not always what they appear. I'm going to share, thank you for your kind attention. Anybody catch any rhymes in there? The next one I'm going to share was based on my first trip in years to St. Croix State Park up in Hinckley. And, I had never realized how huge that park is. Even once you enter the park, you can spend hours and hours driving within the park just to get to various parts of it. So if you have not spent time there, I encourage you to go when you have a lot of time to spare. One of the things that I try to do when I'm going to a place, I don't often do a lot of research before I go, and I love research, but I like to be driven by curiosity to see what I notice first, and then I'm inclined to chase it down after the answers to my questions. So my favorite thing to do is to talk to scientists and researchers and people who've spent time on the land, who know it really well, to inform the poems. And then a lot of that ends up, well, not only inspiring me to write the poem, but it ends up guiding the contents of the poem. And I learn along the way. When I have writing workshops, one of the things that I find in the workshops and the mentorships is people feel that it's an obstacle when they're not an expert on a topic. They think they need to know everything about it before they begin to write. And I say, no, you can write out of interest. You can write out of discovery. You can write out of inspiration from an experience and use that as a springboard to learning more. And of course, you can do the opposite. You can read great books like Northwoods and Waters has on its websites to expand your idea of what this watershed is. But you can also go at it from the other end and just go to a place you've never been. One of the places that I went on this residency that I will read a poem from later was Quamba, Minnesota. I had never heard of Quamba. So I encourage you to go to places you've never been and then be guided by curiosity as to what you might write or do from there. This one is based on that trip to St. Croix State Park, where I know it was just a day there, so I need to go back and back and back and back. It's called After the Blowdown, and when I entered the park, it was really obvious that it was that something had happened there, that landscape had been altered by something natural, something by management. It looked raw in a way, I would say. And I learned that there had been a huge blowdown that affected a large area of the St. Croix Valley, not just St. Croix State Park. And I probably heard about it in the news at the time, but I don't think I ever fully understood the extent of it. So this is my experience of that. And also the fact that as I drove in, I saw a red-headed woodpecker that I was thrilled to see. They aren't a very common bird anymore, and they rely on oak savanna as a breeding site. And so that was a delight and really part of the story of the place. So this is called After the Blowdown. 14 miles or so past Lucky Lady Road and east of High Hope's Berry Farm. Beyond the honor system garden stand where pie pumpkins are a steal at $3 each, and more than 13 years now after the big blowdown, when straight-line winds tore up 97,000 acres of the St. Croix Valley, 13,000 of them here in the state park. Workers running for shelter in buildings and joining black bear in the ditches as it passed, snapping massive pines and oaks like wooden matchsticks and bending others so low they never rose again. It might as well be yesterday for those who knew it well in the before times, who still see first what used to be, the absent more tangible than the present. You know how that is. Leaving the rest of us to see with our beginner's eyes the line of white pines along the Kettle River lifting their branches to the sky in whispered benediction. To dwell on the brookies running in the cool waters of Hay Creek, on the jungled growth fed by this year's crazy rains, and these wild plums as red and ripe as ever plums could be, rounding the corner from August to September. And yet, there is no denying an underlying starkness that draws, if not the eye, the gut, to note that something happened here, to wonder at the sparseness of these isolated pin oaks left standing in the aftermath on that July Friday eve, surrounded then by downed trees, their lush summer leaves and needles dashed abruptly to the ground, surrounded now by native prairie that appeared unplanted in the years after the blowdown, having been suppressed for near unto a century by shade, waiting in the droughty soil for its shot at open sky. A shot that had finally come in the form of those 100-mile-an-hour winds, aided in the time since then by burn crews with their torches and intentions, not to restore it as it was in the minute before the storm, but to take this chance to coax back the rare jack pine barrens and oak savanna that once occupied this place, trying to hold this great wild horse of a landscape to a canter, to maintain the fragile détente of these fire-dependent communities in their constant negotiations over closed and open canopy. In so many ways, this is not easy ground to walk, with memories of what was lost, and everywhere stumps still underfoot, hidden by big blue stem so thick you have to part it with your hands in order to pass through, its splay-footed seed heads swaying high above. And just as well, to let the wild lupin beckon to the Carner blues in peace, to let this red-headed woodpecker take its own sweet time and eat its fill of grubs at the open maw of an aspen snag, then fly off toward that gnarled, fire-scarred oak across the clearing with its classic slow-loping flight that hardly seems enough to keep it airborne, its white wing patches flashing like a seaman's beacon across the grasses of this new, old savanna, lighting the way home. Thanks for listening. I mentioned the Carner blues there and the lupin. Carner blue butterflies have not been sighted there, but it is hoped that the wild lupin that showed up after the prairie and savanna returned will beckon some Carner blues, a very rare butterfly that relies on lupin to return. So keep your eyes peeled. Part of me likes the access that parks like this provide, but also I didn't mind that it was difficult to walk in some of these places with all the stumps, because sometimes that gives wildlife a little room, right, as well. So it's a nice balance, I think, between public access and also allowing room for wildlife. So let's see, should we travel somewhere else in the watershed? Anyone want to go to Quamba? Okay, I can't see all hands, but how many people heard of Quamba? Marty, can you see anyone saying yes?
Gary has for sure.
It's worth the trip. It's near Mora. And I went there in part because I heard about a place called Sapsucker Farms, which, as I mentioned earlier, I talked about an organic farmer who grows ginger and makes ginger ale. It's also a brewery. But they have an organic orchard. And what I learned when I went there, they also have trails open to the public. I encourage you to go. They've done all kinds of restoration work on this land. And I don't know how they do it. It's this couple that bought the land. They lived in I think, Minneapolis, moved there. Well, at first they would just camp there because they loved it. And eventually they moved there and created this farm, which is really now a hub for the community and for wildlife because of one of the first things they did was they contacted just about every agency they could think of to advise them on land management and opportunities for cost sharing, for conservation, and protection and creation of wetlands. And it is thrilling. So I invite you to look at their website to see the work they've done there, and introduce yourself to Quamba, right? Uh, so this poem, when I was driving there, one of the things I love about this part of the watershed, I love the forest. I love the woods. I used to work in the boundary waters for the Forest Service, love the North Woods. But I also love the parts of the watershed that are more open, where you do get a sense of prairie and oak savanna. And that's the beauty of a watershed of this size, where it covers, especially in this region, which is why it would make a great National Heritage Area, because it does include so many ecoregions, right? These major biomes that represent uh, different types of landscapes that support different types of wildlife. The river runs through the heart of it and is the lifeblood of it, but the biodiversity in these landscapes is also part of what has drawn people to this place for centuries, right? So on my drive out to Quamba, the skies were huge, right? You can see so far. And um, the clouds were like mountains, right? So this one is called Perspective. On days like this, we can rely on clouds to define the height of the sky, and farmers' neatly spaced round bales of hay to define the depth of fields. Early September, and this lone wood duck in the pond has swapped his breeding season finery for subtlety, posing as a stranger in town with eclipsed plumage of mottled brown, hint of turquoise peeking from beneath a wing, white bridle curving under red eye tinged with gold. It never gets old, this endless unfolding, the sleight of hand when the wood duck disappears behind a screen of grasses and two swans appear, making soft, fluted sounds as they glide into the open and then startle, exploding into flight and leaving curved white feathers floating in their wake. The rock where painted turtles were sunning, now vacant. A green darner dragonfly resuming its rounds. The burial mounds are near enough to feel the gravity of them pulling from beyond the big lake south of the Snake, maybe half a dozen miles in the direction the swans flew. Beloved people curling their spines into the earth as they were curled before their birth, gently laid with beads of shell and pipes of clay, beaver teeth and flakes of agate, decorated vessels, hand-worked, stone sharpened to fine edges, none of which were meant to see the light of day again. People we missed knowing by only a few millennia, a blink in time, who might have laughed to be told that they were living out their lives in prehistory. What does that even mean? People we might have been, people we could still grieve, acknowledge, celebrate, whose direct descendants scroll unbroken into now. Look at those clouds, how they just keep rising in the blue. Ephemera that from this distance might as well be snow-capped mountains, one not so different from the other in the long, long view. You see, I don't write short poems. Um, I refer here to some Indian burial mounds that are located not far um, from sapsucker farms in this community. They are not open to the public, and they actually were unearthed before the law, before the laws protected such sites as sacred, um, which is why it was made clear what their contents were. And since then, it is protected. Um, and thankfully, the laws, I think, have taken a different approach to such sites. But I was really struck. If your interests go to geology, that's another amazing aspect of this place, because on the one hand, we get a sense of how ancient this is, not only the land, but with burial mounds here, the people have been here for such a long time and continue to this day. So, of course, it wasn't unfolding like chapters in a book. Sometimes you'll see first there were the Indians, then there were the fur bearers, then there were the or trappers, then the loggers, then. But of course, all of these things continued, right? There are descendants of all of these chapters in history who are here now, who have stories to tell. And it's part of the richness of the community. And we can recognize that in each other, right? That we all had a time when we came to this place and grew to love it, I would say. So let's see, Marty, how are we on time?
We're doing well. I think we have time, because your poems are long, I think we have time for one more. And then we'll have some time for discussion.
Wonderful. And I'm so grateful people are here tonight and not out looking at, we're still going to have to go out and check out that planetary alignment, right? Tonight, I think it's the peak, which I understand is happening all around the world over this span of days, which is very cool, isn't it? That we could all be in these places around the world and look up at the same planets, right? Being part of that larger community too, of life in the universe. Okay, one more. So I want Northwoods and Waters to choose the topic of the next one here. Franconia Bluffs, Pothole Trail, Taylor's Falls, or Poem for the River Croix, which would have been prior to my residency.
Oh my. I have to speak for the whole group here. How about, let's hear what you have to say about potholes.
Yeah. Sounds good. All right, this was an example of going to a place I'd been many times and trying to look at it through new eyes, right? Which is important. And I was struck by the interpretive signs there, which talked about everything that had gone into the formation of this wondrous place there at Interstate Park. And I had the sense, of course, that history is still unfolding, and there, every single thing we were looking at was on its way toward what's next, including us, I guess. Pothole Trail, Taylor's Falls. I think I have to explain the first part of it just a little. When I was there, I was on the other end of a tunnel through the rock, and I heard a man calling through from the other side of the tunnel. I heard a man's voice saying, "Echo, echo," and it just struck me funny. First of all, you could say any word, right? But then also, well, I thought about answering him, but I knew he wasn't looking for an answer from me, right? So that's what set this in motion. All right. Pothole Trail, Taylor's Falls. A voice calls, "Echo, echo," from the other side of the partially flooded tunnel, the sound ringing in the space above the water, half flooded with spring rains. It strikes me funny when any word would do, and there is no wall to bounce his voice back to him. I consider saying echo back, but let it go. He wasn't talking to me. He was talking to and through this opening in the stone made long ago by volcanoes and torrents flowing from melting glacial ice. Even the oldest people here, moving slowly, choosing with care where to place each footfall on the path, get to feel young by comparison, younger than the trilobites locked into ancient seafloor in the dark little exhibit room, younger than the Ely greenstone, younger than Earth's water in the river, cycling for 4.5 billion years, from cloud to ground, moving in and out of leaves and lungs, brightening lichen, wetting the skin of salamanders so they can breathe. For all the talk of history, it seems these jumbled boulders perched on cliffs have only paused in their free fall, might even now be slipping in tiny increments we can't perceive. Someone, someday, will make a sign that tells what happened next, how the potholes formed by fine grit and grindstones in swirling eddies were in places made more smooth, polished to a glossy sheen by people of all ages through the centuries, drawn to run their hands slowly over the irresistible surface, taking the stories in.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Bravo, Laurie.
Thank you. I appreciate sharing some of these and having the opportunity to spend time in the field and write them.
And open up the gallery here so that we can all see each other. Anyone who wants to open up, we'll have a little bit of discussion time. Thinking about what Laurie just read to us. What does that evoke for you? What do you? Anyone can speak.
Well, I guess I'd like to say that as a naturalist and an educator, and that I enjoyed them greatly. I also like that each one of those was places I had been and things I had done, except for Quanaba. I've never been there, but
Wamba.
I've seen Indian mountains. I've visited many Indian mountains in the area. But I did enjoy.
They're very religious in the Baptist church, and my her husband, my grandfather, was not very religious. In fact, he was, though he worked and he, provided money for the family. He also drank and would go off on binges and leave and desert them for a little while. She held that family and all this.
Wonderful story, Sherry. I think that was Sherry that was speaking.
Chuck, did you say you'd seen Indian mounds?
Oh yes. I've been writing a book about the St. Croix, and one of my chapters is on Indian mountains, and they're all over the place. Almost anytime you have a high hill overlooking a lake, if they're not there, they're somewhere around. And many of them ended up in town parks, places like Frederick, Wisconsin. They built a swimming pool, and they used to give political speeches up on top of the old Indian mountains. Wow. And Rice Lake and a number of places. They're all over the place. Very few of them have actually been there. I only know of one that's been professionally dug up by archaeologists. But back in the 1800s, there used to be a lot of treasure hunters. Right. And they used to dig through them thinking there was gold or something in there. And they destroyed a lot of them. Then there were farmers who just wanted to plow a field and didn't even realize what they were. They just thought there was a bump in the way, so they were getting rid of it. And they're quite fascinating. I growing up in St. Paul and used to go up to Mounds Park, overlooking the railroad tracks, where you could look down over the Mississippi, and that's all Indian mounds from the same era. But they're in many towns. Hudson, Wisconsin has them. Right by the freeway, up on the cliffside. They're all over the place, and I'm glad they're being preserved now. But they're an interesting phenomena. I did want to mention that I really enjoyed the after the blowdown. I lived in the area just south of here. Well, I had a cabin down there. I was teaching in Alaska, but I came down and I saw that storm. I just happened to be there. And I'll always remember because it was the night my grandson was born. And we weren't sure we'd be able to get to the hospital to see him the next day.
Right.
Wow.
So it was a mess in some places. All the roads closed and the trees falling across each other. So I enjoyed all these. They were very reminiscent of memories I had of the different places. And I enjoyed your style of writing. I have written things very similar to that, not about those things, but other things that I've been trying to kind of come up with how I'm going to write and what I want to write about.
Right.
And it's given me some ideas. Just maybe I've been looking too broad and too complicated.
Yeah, I think honestly the angel is in the details. I think I really do.
Mhm.
And you mentioned the word place, and I know a lot of writers, poets in particular, write to express their own spiritual beliefs, their own personal connection with the land, which of course is authentic and legitimate. I tend more to just immerse myself in a landscape and try to understand it, to see what's there, the patterns, the relationships, I just find it endlessly inspiring and interesting, right? And the deeper you go, the more, the more stories are there. Yeah, just briefly, one example of that is a workshop that I gave at Anderson Park over in North Branch, and was sitting on these rocks that they're landscaping rocks around their parking area there, and I thought, what the heck? Well, they're full of fossils, the rocks, the landscaping rocks. So I talked to the supervisor or the superintendent of the park. He was able to tell me where those were purchased, and it turned out to be a gravel mine in Wisconsin. And I was able to talk to the owner of that gravel mine, who was really excited to talk to me and gave me pictures of the layer that those came from, in the landscape, which they're still working, right? And then I sent it to pictures, close-ups of those boulders to a fossil guy who was able to tell me what they were, right? So, oh my goodness, and that's a rock in the parking lot. So it just blows me away the beauty of what is around us, right? These things that took so much time to develop. So I appreciate the comments, Chuck. Good luck on your project.
I think we maybe have time for one more comment. I need to give you some information about how you can stay connected with Laurie and a couple of other things that are coming up. What other comments do we have? Gail.
Yeah, thanks. So this is Gail. A question for Laurie. I mean, I've heard you speak at some of your at one of your talks, and I encourage people to go. I wish I would have had you as a teacher when I was young to make poetry so accessible. I don't understand why people are so frightened of poetry or feel like it's something they won't understand. And I love your love for the river and the watershed. and your accessibility. And if you can just talk about that, I guess it's not a question, but it's such a deep conversation.
But thank you. One thing I would say is I think rap music has helped a lot
Oh.
in terms of inviting younger people to get it. That, I mean, if that's not poetry, I don't know what is, right?
Yeah.
And so I think there might be hope for the future. You know, the people who weren't forced to memorize the same poems in second grade, right?
Yeah.
And one thing I'm happy about is, I guess I didn't mention that part of this residency, there is the opportunity to go into a high school class. I'll be going 4 times into a creative writing class at a high school in Sandstone, or East Central High School, I think is what it's called. But that's a privilege. But it's at 8:15 in the morning, so good luck to me, right? Teaching poetry to high schoolers at 8:15 in the morning. I'll have to report back.
Oh, Laurie, if anyone can keep them entranced, it will be you. We have our full confidence in you.
Well, thank you. My daughter said, bring muffins and bagels.
Good idea. Your daughter is wise. Laurie, thank you so much for being here tonight. It has just been entrancing. I knew it would be. I'm a Laurie Allmann groupie, so I want to give you, if you now are starting to become a Laurie Allmann groupie, I want to give you some other information about how you can stay in contact with her. This is actually about the next live from Northwoods and Waters. We're going to be hearing stories from the St. Croix headwaters up by Solon Springs. John Swanberg will be with us, and Thomas Wayne King, who's moderator and author. He'll read from his new book. If you've been with us with anything with Thomas Wayne King, you'll get this. He's a hoot. The name of his book is Boots, Blooms, Barks, and Baz. Anecdotes of Northland life and lore. He and his wife have a farm way up. You can see Lake Superior from where they are. And they have, I believe, Icelandic sheep. And so it's always interesting with Thomas, and he's bringing in John this time. So we'll get to hear about Solon Springs. And it's not moving. You can visit our website, northwoodsandwaters.org. We have been doing this for quite some time, and all of our past live presentations are there. You can listen to them and view them. So please visit our website, sign up for our newsletter. And on there, you can connect with Laurie Allmann. All of her performances and presentations and workshops, it's all described on there. I want to call out one in particular. On February 22nd, Laurie is going to be the keynoter at Dinner at the Lake. Her topic is called Wild Tales, I think. Wild Tales of something, I'm not sure. But it's
Wild tales.
What is it, Laurie?
Telling wild tales.
Telling Wild Tales. It's at Osprey Wilds in Sandstone, and you get dinner and drinks, and you get to hear Laurie read her poetry again. But she's going to be all over the East Central region of the watershed, and so do go onto the website and see what is happening. And so I want to thank everyone here, Laurie Allmann and our audience. Thank you for coming out tonight. It was really great to have you here. And so with that, I am going to conclude live from Northwoods and Waters on this January 21st day. And we can keep the lines open. You can continue to talk with each other and with Laurie. But I am going to officially end and welcome you to the next live from Northwoods and Waters. That's for me editing. So now, if you want to stay on and talk, please do. If you are ready to go on and do something else, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Laurie.
What is the date for the telling wild tales?
Oh,
February 22nd,
at Osprey Wilds.
Osprey Wilds.
Okay.
I'm
Thank
planning.
you.
Gary and I are going to go there. That's going to be fun.
I'll also be at the Earth Day or Earth Fest at Wild River State Park.
That's right. Thanks for a plug,
In
shout
April.
out for Wild River State Park.
Keynote.
She's going to be a keynoter. And that is a full day of celebration. That's a great day. Gary, what's the date?
The 26th, I believe. I'll just check here.
26th of April, he's saying, but it's on the website too.
26th. Laurie's on at 1 o'clock.
Did you hear that? Lori's on at 1.
I better be there then, huh?
Yeah, you better be there.
Well, thanks, everybody. I hope you check out one of the upcoming programs. Please give me ideas if you have ideas for people you think I should interview for the Local Voices Project, or young people who would love some encouragement, one-on-one, meeting at a library, right? A mentor for a while. We've got some months ahead of us yet, so
Yeah,
I welcome your ideas.
great. Well, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Check out the planets.
Yeah. Good luck on your book, Chuck. Keep us posted. Think about being
Thank
part of
you.
lives. Think about being part of lives sometime. If your book is around about this area and
Okay.
St. Croix watershed, we're always looking for people to speak.
Okay, I will.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Nina, thanks for being on. Dawn, glad to have you
Everybody.
here. Bye-bye.
Thank you.